This is Chatter. I'm Shane Harris. This week, we're on the road at the Aspen Security Forum. I grabbed a microphone and sat down with my colleagues Courtney Kube of NBC News and Gordon Lubold of the Wall Street Journal to talk all about this annual gathering of national security leaders high up in the Rocky Mountains.
What's fascinating is it comes a week after NATO and, Ukraine, and it's Ukraine's decision and stuff, but on the sidelines of that, I picked up more and more conversation about people saying, how many more Ukrainians are going to die for another mile, a square mile of land?
And I literally don't say fake news, even as a joke, because I just feel like it's completely wrong, and that particular term is like way overused and it isn't accurate to begin with.
You know, we kind of joke it's like speed dating, right, for national security nerds, because you can stack all these meetings.
Courtney Kube, Gordon Lubold, welcome to Chatter.
So glad to be here.
Aren't you so excited?
I'm super excited. It's my first time on Chatter. So
Ooh, and Gordon's too. Oh, Gordon. Oh, yes, sure. That's going to be a very family podcast.
Oh, it is.
So you'll have to leave.
Yeah, but I can't carry this by myself. Don't leave me.
We are here. We're at the Aspen Security Forum, you guys.
It's so exciting. It's a
sweet gig. It's a sweet gig.
Yeah,
it is.
To give people an idea, we're sitting here in a little podcast studio, but if we walked outside right now, what would we see?
Amazing, gorgeous
What
mountains.
did you see?
And what did I see on my panic run before my panels yesterday? When I was trying to chill myself out, I ran straight into a bear. And it's an
actual bear.
An actual bear. I have a picture on my phone. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the first thing I did was text Gordon and say, "You're running with me tomorrow." So because I mean, Gordon's wonderful. He's an excellent reporter, but I feel like I could outrun him if a bear were to come after us.
Probably. I was going to get my e-bike, actually.
Yeah.
I use the e-bikes while I'm here. They're so fun.
A lot of people do.
It's like I feel like I'm cheating on an e-bike, but I love it so much.
Bears in a tree last year.
Yeah, I saw a little baby bear.
There are signs up around here about bears.
What I did learn was I read the book, the little booklet that they put in your room here that says what to do if you find a bear.
Yeah.
I did the exact wrong thing, which was gasp, stop, take a photo, and then keep going, which is not what you're supposed to do, apparently.
The bear stopped you and asked you what you thought about Ukraine's membership in NATO.
The bear did have a lot of feelings about what was happening with Israel right
An
now.
informed bear.
He was much more informed. Yeah.
I love it. It is absolutely gorgeous here.
Yeah.
So for folks who don't know, the Aspen Security Forum is basically this annual gathering of people from pretty much around the world, but mostly I would say European countries, United States, there's some Africa representation, a little bit of Asia, but basically it's the big annual sort of global security forum that's also kind of not like the Munich Forum, which is way more official, ministerial level people and lots of statements are being made. This is kind of like hanging out in the mountains for a week with all of these security types. Yeah.
It reinforces this kind of liberal media elite thing, but it is a nice gig. And you do have access to a lot of people that you want to talk to for stories, for panels, all these panels.
Right. It is it's been going, 15 years, I feel like, roughly?
I think I've been coming 9, and it was definitely going before that. So.
Yeah.
And it is the other thing I find very valuable is people get outside of DC and they're just a little more willing to talk. I don't know if it's the altitude, I don't know if it's the chlorophyll water or what it is. It might be
It could be the booze. There's a lot of that.
I couldn't comment on the booze, obviously, but I do hear that people are imbibing here.
Yes.
But it also once you get out of DC, people are a little bit more candid. And what I find valuable is some of these. There's actually a lot of industry people here, tech people, and so you get interesting story ideas.
Yeah,
and you actually learn. So it's valuable for a reporter, but I could understand how people would see it and be like,
I think on the outside, right? And then it's here we are. And
Well, it's also, in addition to being a beautiful place, I will say, of all the cities I think I've been to in America, I have never seen the level of wealth that there is in Aspen. I mean, it truly is off the charts in terms of real estate and walking around town, and there's just a Prado boutique and every name you can think of, and
hamburgers are $50.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I think maybe I haven't done Davos, but I have a feeling it's kind of in that kind of vein-ish.
It's that kind of feel where I walked home last night and there were these amazing, beautiful Well, actually, they weren't. They're not my style, but they're just huge. They're like super expensive houses.
Yeah.
So you're too good for Aspen. I get it. They're not your style. No, I get it. Everyone understands. I've had 2 years in a row. This is my second year in a row where I've had like this sort of harsh juxtaposition between my work travel and then Aspen.
Yeah.
So like this year I was in Israel and then like came out here a week later. And last year I went straight from Aspen to Niger.
Oh God.
And so like when you look at so when you look at it from that, the juxtaposition between what is it's a surreal, otherworldly like level of wealth here to people who have nothing and or who are fighting and so that's when it really becomes more profound. But I will say again, the forum is fascinating. I learned so much. And they do attract fascinating people every single day. Every single year.
They've got good people, and it's like for journalists, it's fishing in a barrel because you can just like walk up to it. As we just did recently, and just a bunch of people because there's also this transplant from Washington. Like it's like.
You will run into like lawmakers. You might run into the national security advisor. You might run into an ambassador. All kinds of formers, generals walking around everywhere.
So many formers. That's actually I think people would find would be surprised by is there are so many former officials who really stay plugged in to what's going on, and conversations with them can be so valuable.
Yeah, that's good. So what have been some of like the highlights you guys think? Let's talk a little bit about this of the conference so far. And one thing we should note too that's like, and this is kind of in the air right now, a lot of senior administration officials who were going to be here, including the Homeland Security Secretary, the White House Security Advisor, the CIA Director, dropped out at the last minute. Some clearly because of the assassination attempt on President Trump. They are back in Washington answering questions. There's also a lot happening in the Middle East. There could be negotiations around a ceasefire for which the CIA Director would need to get on an airplane and go. So what have kind of been to you guys the highlights? And you've been moderating panels too of this year when it's not all the people we usually expect are here, but also what's in the air is the election and a president who's currently, facing questions from his own party about whether he should run.
I mean, that's the whole cloud. That's I don't want to say it's not cloud, but it's like that's the subtext of all of this right now because of what happened on Saturday and because of what's going on with Biden or not going on with Biden. We don't know. Like that's the kind of main question that we've been talking to people about is like whether all of this and right now is the question of Biden could drop out like literally any day or not at all.
Right, and we're recording this, we should say, on Thursday, July 18th, so by the time people hear this on Tuesday, he may not be the nominee anymore. Right. We don't know.
I mean, I keep telling people, like I got this email from an odds maker, and the guy predicted 8-1. I don't do odds very well, but 8-1 that the coach for England would be sacked.
Yeah.
Biden would be out by the end of this week, because that would be tomorrow. The coach of England was sacked earlier this week, and so here we are.
It would be kind of wild if Biden dropped out tomorrow when the Secretary of State and the White House National Security Advisor are both here and speaking.
Also, I mean, there's another, like, it's almost even been lost, but President Biden came down with COVID.
Yeah,
so
think
about
night,
you've got so this was in in the last 18 hours or so that we've learned this, But so you have Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken they've been with President Biden in recent days, probably in close quarters. So
do they have COVID?
Yeah, do they have COVID? Is everything? I mean the
oh, that's interesting. I didn't think of that.
I mean, think about it. They were all at NATO together.
The organizers here are sweating that one.
I feel terrible because they've had so much upheaval in this schedule.
Yeah.
The one thing that I have felt, and this has been unlike any other forum I've ever been to at Aspen, because usually there's so much focus on like the current larger world events. So Ukraine has been a big focus. I suspect I think Israel on October 7th would have had a much bigger role this year, but instead every one of my conversations starts with what's happening with President Biden. Is he going to drop out? Who would maybe come in after him? What happened with the assassination attempt? And interestingly enough, I think this has been, again, these are people here who are very well informed, even if they're formers, and they stay in touch. So many of my conversations have focused on who's going to have senior roles in Trump administration too. And no one's talking about who's going to have roles in a Democrat administration.
That's so interesting.
And I feel like it's just, I mean, look, the political landscape it's been like a seismic change over the last month. So we still have several months left before the election. We have no idea what can happen. But it is, I do feel like I learn a lot of trends here, stepping back from DC and looking at them from out here. And that's what I've been fascinated by. And the, it's like the favorite DC parlor game, right? Who's going to have what roles in the next administration has been fascinating out here.
Right, but the fact that everybody's talking about that side more than the other side. And we should know that this is the same week of the Republican National Convention,
right? Which,
I don't know if that was by design or not, but there's very few Republicans here. But that's still what people are mostly talking about.
And we would tend to see, I think, in any year in which, like when the Democrats are running the administration, and given the tilt of the Republican Party, probably not as many Republicans here, but you'd see them, I think, more from the Senate. You would see more of these kind of like classic national security foreign policy types who are in Milwaukee right now. The other thing you would tend to see here are ambassadors from foreign countries. They're all in Milwaukee right now, right?
I think that's so telling. Yeah. There is a smaller presence of international presence here than I feel like we've had in a while.
They're all gathering intel on the Trump administration and J.D. Vance, who has been very outspoken about not really supporting Ukraine. I mean, I would imagine the kinds of people who would be here would be looking at Trump and looking at Vance and thinking they're going to be very hostile to the kinds of things that we're trying to promote at this conference and the values that people kind of generally ascribe to here, like, yes, NATO membership, yes, support for Ukraine, absolutely. These are kind of like not really debated security positions that are kind of the mainstream, and they're probably looking at Milwaukee freaking out a little bit right now, I think.
I just did a panel where I asked that question toward the end. It was about resiliency, but it was about how do you plan for the unpredictability of a potential Trump 2.0. And guy tried to answer the question. He didn't really answer it exactly because there's no way. But he definitely touched on how shaky allies feel right now about what it is. I don't know on the Ukraine issue because Courtney and I were just having a conversation, about how that gets resolved within the Republican Party because it's J.D. Vance is super strident on that issue, but there's a lot of Republicans who are senior respected Republicans who definitely are strident on
supporting. And he will not be the president. Let's be clear about that, right? I mean, it's but being so outspoken about it, it creates this very uncomfortable optic. And he's giving voice to that part of the party that is not supportive of it. 100%. And if he is the vice president, that's a pretty damn big voice, isn't 100%. It? Let's play the guessing game let's do the parlor game thing, because that's fun. And that really is one of the real highlights of why people come here. They were like, let's do it.
This is the fun part.
It's the fun part. But it's the panels are always interesting and very substantive, and you guys are doing heroic doing moderating at least 2 each, right?
3,
we basically feel like heroes.
Yeah, you should.
I mean, here we are in Aspen, we've come all this way.
Yeah, to perform. But the real a lot of things with for people, the real juice of the conference comes in the sideline conversations and cornering people, and they're much more frank, as you said, Courtney, than they were. So, all right, let's name names. Secretary of Defense. Who are people talking about?
I mean, the names
in a Trump administration.
In a Trump administration, Senator Cotton, Tom Cotton is one that we keep hearing. I think Congressman Mike Waltz. He's another one. He spoke at the Democrat or the Republican convention last night.
Afghan war veteran, right?
He's a war veteran. He's also close to President Trump. And
pick me.
You're not going to be Secretary of Defense.
No.
What are you talking about?
Wait, I have one. I only have one.
Who do you think?
Dan Sullivan.
No. Really? Yes. Do you think so?
Really?
100%.
Senator from Alaska?
Senator from Alaska, very close with Trump, and also, former Marine.
Yeah.
Still.
And they do talk about defense issues. That's a good one.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I feel like that, and he's he's a reasonably moderate Republican, but he's got very strident views on Ukraine. He's got strident views on China.
Okay.
And I just wanted to jump in there because I didn't know I don't know who else.
The only other kind of name I've heard, but I don't think is legit, is Robert O'Brien, who served in the Trump administration. But I think he is angling a little bit more towards state than DOD.
Interesting.
And he is he's been in Milwaukee at the convention. That's the other thing. Pompeo is the other one. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, and he is speaking at the convention Thursday. So that's the night. Right?
I think he would really like to be defense secretary. He's done CIA. He's done state.
He's got a military background, West Point grad.
Right.
But what's hard? It's the hard thing. Is knowing who's really in the inner circle, and then it feels like Trump's inner circle is very permeable. It feels like you can be in one day and you're out the next. And so But yeah, those have been the big names we've been hearing.
For SecDef?
Yeah.
Okay.
Secretary of State.
Let's do State.
I've heard Senator Haggerty. That's a name that was sort of surprising to me this week, the last few days. And then Robert O'Brien is the other one that's been a name.
Right.
What about
Marco Rubio was.
Marco Rubio?
Yeah, maybe a consolation prize for not getting
Rubio.
I've
for
also
VP.
heard, like, as sort of a strange place for him, maybe going Intel. Like maybe go to Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah, I've seen that name surfacing up in some like reporting recently, which to me would strike me as kind of like a weird thing. Like you would, I would think he would much rather be Secretary of State or Defense than be DNI.
It's not as public a position.
It's not,
but he does have the intel background.
Yeah.
That he, and that's. So it's hard to say. The other thing is I always find really hard on these, and especially if we're talking about Trump administration, is if you look back to the previous Trump administration, not a lot of the senior people came out of that unscathed.
Yeah.
They either were fired or they quit or he had to resign or whatever. And if you're talking about someone like a Tom Cotton, Senator Cotton, he's not, he's what, in his 40s, I believe?
47, I think.
Yeah, and so does he want to go into an administration where there might be a bit of an end game for him in only a couple of years?
Yeah, you're right, because if you think about the people who lasted all 4 years, Pompeo
is the only one. I mean,
that's in the national security positions. That's really the only one.
Yeah, I mean Robert O'Brien. He wasn't all 4 years, but he came out. He seems to still be within the circle.
Yeah, and he was one.
Really didn't leave in a bad way.
Not the best. She would come back.
I would think she'd come back. I just don't know what.
She would.
Yes.
But what about Congressman Chairman Turner or McCall? Who I know
for
McCall.
State?
No, I don't know. I'm just saying where. And then, no, for State though. What about Rick Grinnell?
See, this is there's a good one. Grinnell. Yeah. Where does Grinnell go?
Well, and he clearly wants something. But here's the thing: could a Rick Grinnell get confirmed? Is the question, because let's say you have a Republican majority in the Senate. But are there a couple of members who might not go to confirm him? So does he have to go more of like a national security advisor?
Yeah.
Or this fascinating thing that people have been talking about here, which I probably shouldn't say, but I will, is this notion... don't report on this, Lubold. Yeah. There's this fascinating idea I've heard that President Trump would put people into roles even if they aren't confirmed. And okay, they could go in and be either acting whatever or performing the duties of whatever. And there's the Vacancies Act, which I've never really understood exactly how long that is, but you could serve in that capacity in a certain time. But then, is the Vacancies Act even enforceable? Could President Trump 2.0 put people in and just leave them in those roles?
This is kind of what Chad Wolf did at DHS.
Yes.
I mean, he was the Homeland Security Secretary, or never really, I don't think he was ever confirmed.
I don't believe so.
And it was always these people performing the duties of.
Exactly. So why not do that in these roles that you want? Now, here's the one thing, caveat on that. Again, not a lawyer. If I understand it correctly, if they're in those positions and they are performing the duties of or they're not confirmed, then some of their decisions, I believe, can be challenged legally. So does that put them in a precarious position? So, but it seems like the people who we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, who might be who they might want some like senior national security role that President Trump sees as like their inner circle are Rick Grinnell and Kash Patel. Yeah. And so where would they potentially go? National security advisor is non-confirmed, so.
Yeah, that might be the place where you stick them. I will say, like in talking to people, particularly foreign sources, the idea of like a Kash Patel CIA director absolutely freaks people out. Yeah. And I think that's somebody who would not be confirmable. And Grinnell, maybe not. It's like it's kind of touch and go on that. But to your point on the Vacancies Act, again, I'm not a lawyer either, but I've heard some people talking about if these people were in those those positions as acting, doing the duties of longer than was allowable. What if someone an outside group files a legal challenge to that? Let's say it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, Mr. President, you can't do what you're doing. And then he says, stop me. And then you have a constitutional crisis.
See, that's the thing. I don't know how enforceable Vacancies Act is. I genuinely don't know it. But people have suggested to me here this week that another President Trump may not really care about his people getting confirmed.
And it then depends on what happens in Congress anyway.
In the Senate, exactly.
The Senate, to confirm, I'm suddenly drawing a blank. What's the number?
You need a majority,
just
right?
a regular majority.
Yeah.
So that's an easy thing to.
But you got to get out of a filibuster, I guess, too. So it has to be. You'd have to have a filibuster-proof majority, right?
It's just. It's just we're in a different.
One thing I've been picking up on, and this is another thing that's so great about like this conference, is you just kind of you just pick up the vibes, right? There's a lot of just vibing that goes on in this place, and I was expecting more, particularly given the general political affiliation of people who are here, which is Democratic Party right now. There are not a lot of Republicans walking around in Aspen right now. That there would be way more, and maybe you guys are hearing it too. I'd like to know, just existential freaking out about the idea of a Trump administration. It's there, but I also hear people being like, okay, well, Tom Cotton, that could work. I mean, Mike Pompeo wouldn't be, he'd be kind of reasonable. There's a sense in which people are starting to talk them into, okay, this is how it could maybe work. But underneath it, there's dread. Don't you think?
Yeah, but it's funny because of the events of the last week and starting with the thing that happened with the debate and then with Trump's attempted assassination, there's a normalization because of where we are right now, where the momentum is going.
Yes.
Trump, as David Axelrod said, he should be buying lottery tickets because he has a string of such good.
Right.
But that there's a normalization or an inevitability right now.
Yeah.
I feel like we have 3 more crazy episodes before November, whatever those are, of the stature of the last few days.
Yeah, that's the thing is we have no idea what's going to happen still over the next few months before the election. The one place I have sensed a little bit of dread, it's a little outside of my world, but is Department of Justice and Attorney General.
Yeah.
That's a place where, I do think there's a sense that there will be some sort of a little bit of insulation at DOD and maybe at state because President Trump, the next President Trump, if he's elected, would pick people there who are a little bit more establishment. Yeah, but I think the concern is if he put someone who's a real loyalist to DOJ or as Attorney General and then sort of wipe the place out, cleaned it out, what would that potentially lead to? Would he fire Chris Wray?
Yeah.
There's a lot of
and then
assumption
can you use the FBI? I mean, as he said he wants to do, is essentially your instrument of political retribution. Mm-hmm. And I think that is where, and I know people Ben Wittes at Lawfare has written pretty thoughtfully about this too, is that the kind of quote unquote weaponized Justice Department, that's actually the place where he could do the most damage domestically. Mm-hmm. If you put a loyalist at the head of CIA, I mean, there could be a real risk that basically you're not getting actually unvarnished intelligence about threats in the world, or lots of people could quit, and then you hollow out the senior ranks of people who know how to run the place. But I think you're right, Courtney, that feels like where people have the most anxiety because you're talking about the law enforcement apparatus.
And there's not a lot of presence here that represents that. There's some. That's right. There's some Interpol, but yeah. So that. The other thing that there's been a little bit of parlor gaming about that doesn't really relate so much to the president, except it sort of does, is a lot of these senior military officer jobs that some of our people are coming up. General Laura Richardson, Southcom just spoke. She's most likely up for retirement. There's a lot of these jobs that are coming up. Yeah. And another fascinating thing that I've been sort of picking up, and I think this is just people, speculating at this point. I don't know that but is it possible that we saw this huge backlog, this delay of confirmations for general officers?
Well, general officers.
General officers. And is it possible that some of those nominations or some of those confirmations will go through a little bit early, and would they try to get them through in the Biden administration to get some people in place? And that's another bit of parlor gaming that people are going through. There's going to be a huge turnover. Mm-hmm. There already has been actually over the last 6 months, but there's going to be another big turnover of combatant commanders at the Pentagon, and then what about senior leadership at the Pentagon from the military perspective? Could there be changes in the chairman and who might be even some of the service secretaries? So that's also been, it's a little bit lower level, wonkier talk.
And I feel like Trump, though, having gone through, because that's the whole interesting thing about 2.0, because 1.0 he was doing his thing, but he learned. It's really interesting about the senior military officers because I think he thinks that they should pledge fealty, to him, and so you can see him going in. So CQ, when did he come? So he's got
CQ Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs
of Staff. Thank you. He just got in October, so he's got 3 more years. Yeah. But you can see Trump just saying, "Okay, I don't."
Yeah, but we've got other changes, like CENTCOM is coming up, UCOM comes up in a little under a year. It's like...
But what's to stop Trump from just saying, like, the CENTCOM commander, I don't like the way he's doing this, X, Y, or Z. I'm just going to, like...
There's precedent for the president
right?
fire... Yeah, the president can fire... Remember, General Mattis, when he was at CENTCOM, was fired out of the job, Right. So, I mean, there is precedent for him wanting to put his own generals... I mean, you can't see this because we're on a podcast, but I'm air quoting his own generals into some of these roles. And then what would that look like? There's been a surprising amount of talk about that here. And I think that's because, while we did see quite a few civilian people have to bail on the conference, the military people have all shown up who were supposed to be here.
That is interesting, isn't it?
And it's been fascinating. And I will say also, my conversations with like these senior officers in the military have all started talking about Biden and Trump. I mean, it is just this.
It permeates everything.
Yeah, it is the main talk of this conference.
Yeah, and happening, we should say too, on the sidelines. Like, none of the panels are devoted to any of that. The panels are kind of more like the polite conversation sometimes, and then there's like a level of candor that happens offline. I've been surprised that there hasn't been as much conversation, at least in the panels anyway, about the war in Ukraine. And I just wonder if we've hit this point now where it kind of feels like this, I don't even like the word stalemate as much as it feels like it's just drawing inexorably towards this thing is going to have to be settled politically, and kind of everyone knows that and no one wants to say it. What do you guys think?
And what's fascinating is it comes a week after NATO, where we had all these people, sweltering in DC last week talking and Ukraine and it's Ukraine's decision and stuff, but on the sidelines of that, there was also I picked up more and more conversation about people saying, look, how much longer is this? Can this go?
Keep going.
How many more Ukrainians are going to die for another square mile of land?
Right.
And that's a harsh reality, and it's a harsh conversation to have. But to your point, it's 2.5 years in, and it has really become a war of inches.
I just feel like all this other stuff that's happening right now in our country is pushed, because we didn't really talk a lot about Gaza. I mean,
there's been very little discussion on Israel and Gaza here.
Right.
Very little.
And
you'd think it would be a centerpiece.
A huge piece.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I really wonder if that's because it's just such a divisive issue. I don't know that, but even on the sidelines, there hasn't been as much talk about it.
No, there really hasn't. And Netanyahu's coming to Washington next week to speak to Congress, so maybe people are kind of anticipating that. But that too has just been notably kind of off the table.
Does he meet with Biden? Because now the Biden's got COVID.
Well, now this is the plan. The last I heard is they're waiting to see.
Yeah, I mean, he may, if he takes Paxlovid, he could be clear by next week. It's possible, but
my God,
who knows? I know. There's been
they should be clear, right?
I think
it was
so.
14 days it's like the last time, right? In July 22 when he had it.
I don't remember.
They've changed the rules now.
Yeah.
Well, the rules are right. The rules are very different for some of us. But I won't. We'll talk about that later.
That'll be in the B-roll.
But that is interesting, though, because he comes in. I mean, I think he would be safe enough by then. But
I would think so. But who knows?
Do we want to try and handicap the race? Do we want to pretend we're political reporters for a second?
Anything I say, it's the opposite of what's going to happen, because I have never been right about any political race.
Politics.
I have never been right about politics.
Generally, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Generally, those of us who cover national security, it's not that we're not aware of the politics, but the politics are not the thing that we're trying to suss out and to really isolate and understand, right? And sometimes it can be tricky because you have to factor in the political piece of it, and everything in national security has a political valence. It just does. I mean, these are instruments of political officers. But one of the things that I find it's interesting, and this is maybe a way of kind of injecting politics into a substantive national security discussion, is a lot of sources who I talk to who are genuinely concerned that if President Biden were reelected, that he cannot serve 4 more years. And that seems to me is always the subtext of this political context of conversation of can he be reelected is can he actually serve. And there are people who I think that it depresses them to say it, but that are genuinely worried about that right now. Are you guys picking up on those kinds of...
Oh, yeah. I mean, right, because we're so in the moment where I'm putting my hand in front of my face because we're just in this moment right now. But that was actually pointed out earlier today by somebody, which is like, it's one question about whether he can climb up the stairs to Air Force One and down again without falling, and be reelected. But 1 year, and whatever this is going on with him could be a pretty precipitous decline. So like even a year from now, like we could be talking about a completely different situation. And I can't predict what will happen in November, obviously, but I feel like that's what's weighing on everybody's minds. And it's amazing how many liberals are like getting increasingly just frustrated with where we are right now, given his lack of a decision.
Right.
Yeah, I spoke with a Democrat who's a former government person, yesterday after the announcement came out that President Biden has COVID.
Right.
And the person said, just it basically said, look, this is over. Look at this juxtaposition we have right now, where we have President Trump gets shot and stands up and raises his fist in the air and starts saying fight, and President Biden is taken out by COVID and is sidelined. And so it's not just that Trump has had this series of wins; it's that President Biden has had a series of losses,
right.
and so people have openly discussed. In fact, even yesterday, or the day that he was diagnosed with COVID, when he came out and he sort of waved to the media and said, "I feel good" or whatever, even that people have said to me that he just didn't look very good.
And I think that nobody wants to jump the gun on that, and there's an element of respect too, I think. But I think that that's going to become a conversation that if he's reelected, it's going to very quickly shift to his fitness to serve for 4 years, and that gets read very much to the kind of topics that we're discussing here. And he is the commander-in-chief. He is the chief of our foreign policy. One of the things I find interesting, just to switch gears a little bit about kind of the Aspenness of things, is like I remember like 6 or 7 years ago being here and like being on the shuttle from the airport and having a room next to a guy who was, at the time a fairly prominent former Democratic White House staffer. He's currently the Secretary of State. Right? So like Tony Blinken was just hanging out as a normal conference attendee, and now look where he is, right? There's a lot of that kind of thing around here too, where it's like people who used to be a big somebody and now are kind of like a regular person, and then people who are kind of up and coming and you don't know in 4 or 5 years they could be running the CIA.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting element of the atmosphere here.
They get a lot of good people here, but again, it's like, because to the point of what we're just talking about, is like the momentum that is right now for Trump, right? We're just not seeing as many of those people, although we may have met one of them just recently, today. I just think that there's just fewer of those people because we're thinking.
Yeah, and they didn't. And the Trump people didn't come to this conference as much.
They didn't. Even during the Trump years, we didn't see as much. And then remember Secretary Mattis, when he was in, he put a limit to how many military people could come to these. So we even had a much smaller number of uniformed. The thing is, it's also like, because of what we were talking about at the top, it's Aspen and stuff. It's not always a great look. I mean, obviously that's right.
Yeah, because it looks like
people who dropped out had things they had to do, but it's also not a great look. Like Secretary Mayorkas from DHS was not going to be in Aspen. If any,
though he's been here previously.
The director of the Secret Service was supposed to be here.
Yeah, she was supposed to be here.
She was supposed to be here. I mean, can you imagine?
No, it would be absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's, but at the same time, it's sort of one of the things I've always felt that Aspen has going for is like it's not that hard to get somebody to say yes to an invitation to come someplace that is absolutely this beautiful in the middle of July when people are roasting in Washington.
Yeah, the one thing I think people may also realize is that these people come here and their days are stacked with meetings.
Right.
Like you watch.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, you're trying to meet with some senior military officer and he's or she's sitting with the senator for an hour, and so there's value to the people. It's not just the journalists. They get a ton of. It's we kind of joke. It's like speed dating, right, for national security nerds, because you can stack all these meetings. Same thing.
Right, but it's not right. But it is a good point, because when you were trying to do kind of like setup of out here, it's like it actually is very busy, and we're running around from 8 in the morning to 11 at night to see people, and for journalists, but also for other people who are. Not journalists. Like it's a great opportunity to meet. I mean, the thing is, like, although a lot of these people come from DC and they're out here, again, for us, for journalists, like I said, it's fishing in a barrel, because you can't get access to these people like you can here.
Yeah, it's just too busy. It's too busy in Washington. Here, like, while they are busy, there's we're all kind of like trapped in a mountain resort.
Well, you're all eating, everyone's eating in the same little, going
tent,
to get food. So it's like, whilst, so and so's getting their delicious vegan burrito made with
Yeah.
superfoods, because everything here is like so fancy and delicious.
Yes.
While they're getting that, you can say, hey, what do you think is going to happen with X, Y, and Z?
Totally.
So
We should spare a moment for the food. You eat all the time.
I never get
at
to
this
eat here. I literally eat like protein bars because I'm
There's
always
so much food.
I'm
And they
eating
ran out of
through
food
everything.
yesterday.
Yeah,
They did.
I had a brownie yesterday, which I'm not ashamed of.
I think you had a flourless chocolate torte.
That's what
Yeah, I
it was.
know,
It was
no, good point,
flourless
good point.
chocolate torte, not brownie. Tastes like a brownie.
It was cage-free, too, I think.
Yeah, of course it was.
And there's a cappuccino bar, a latte
There is a
bar.
cappuccino bar.
Yeah, and when they closed yesterday, he looked at me like, "I'm so sorry, sir."
Also, can we
Must
talk
be a
about
nightmare for you.
God damn it! Threw the table
the
upside
cappuccino
down.
guy? Is, by the way, he has been coming here for years.
I mean, yeah, he's there
Years.
forever.
When I walked up the first morning, I walked up and said, "You're back again!" And he
Yeah.
looked at me like I was completely insane.
Yeah.
Like, why do you remember me, crazy lady? And I was
Yeah.
like, because you provide me with delicious caffeine year after year.
Totally.
In
No,
Aspen.
it's great.
And he kind of looks like Fabio, right?
He does. He
Just
has the
admit it.
hair.
Everyone's
Oh, wow.
saying
He
he's
looks
got
like
Fabio
like
hair.
a mountain Fabio. He's kind of leathered.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like yeah,
Long hair.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. Fabio. I'm dating myself.
I brought my husband to this last year. He didn't come to the events, but like he hung out in Aspen. So it's a fun thing.
How
to
was it
experience
for
process.
him to just hang out? Because it would...
I think it was like something. It was like a fun thing that he maybe doesn't really need to do again.
Right.
I mean, he like he had a lot of hiking. He took a lot of photographs for paintings because he's
Oh,
a
yeah,
painter.
flowers,
And like
right.
the legs like work like that. Yeah, exactly. But there is something also just in like walking around Aspen. Like, I mean, it is kind of just a trip. I mean, the people watching here is wild.
Yeah.
There's a lot of plastic surgery.
Yes.
There's a lot of designer clothes.
The waitress, the server, when I went and got my cappuccino this morning, because Fabio wasn't there, he was
Oh.
busy. I went in there, and I mean,
There's a lot of work.
there's a lot going on.
There's a lot of work getting done in
There's-
Aspen,
you know
men
what I-
and women alike.
I'm very struck by how many couples I see. They significantly older man
Yeah.
and a much younger plastic surgeried
Yeah.
younger woman. And
We have a name for such like sugar. Dad.
I do believe a lot of them may not all be married for love, but I can't
It's
say
possible.
that. It's possible.
I can't say that. You just said
And also, you know what also was killing me? Because I got super lost last night. Shocking. Aspen's like the size of a thumbnail, but
Yeah, it's
I
so
get
small.
lost, of course. And as I was on my long walk, I saw so many older men, younger women, and then little kids.
Yeah.
Which, like, as someone with kids, that always stuck out to me.
yeah.
It's like, okay, there's a 70-year-old dude with this little kid.
There's also a lot. You talk about the houses. There are a lot of houses that look like Bond villain mansions.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
That was like the one I was thinking of when I was walking home
Yeah.
last night. It looked like a professional building, like where
Yeah.
you go to the dentist.
Yeah,
It
like
was
just glass built into
glass,
the side
all
of
these weird,
cliffs.
Everything has there's like giant stones and giant like wood logs that make
Yeah.
up the houses. You can tell everything is like sustainable and
Yeah,
and gorgeous. I believe me, I'm speaking out of pure jealousy how gorgeous it is.
But this is a dumb question, I guess. But I don't know what the politics. I mean, we talk about the liberal kind of elite thing, but I don't. The politics of Aspen. The people I know. I was stopped on the
I
street
don't
last
know.
night because of this, which we might talk about.
Oh, the free Evan button. Yeah, we should talk about that.
And the guy, and by the way, the guy with his friend. The friend was a guy, and also had some work. Had some work done. But they were very tuned into Evan, and they wanted to know the update. And then they were like avid readers of the Wall Street Journal, whatever. But which was nice, whatever. But they were. It made it very clear. They made it very clear about who they liked in the fall, Trump.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised. But I know some other people here who tend to be not part of any kind of liberal elite establishment, but I don't know what the politics actually.
There's so few
Aspenites
people
are.
who live in Aspen. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't even know.
And then we'd have to separate the people who are like, the people who own houses and live in Aspen and the people like who work for a living in Aspen to cater to all those people.
Yeah.
And it's a extremely wide.
and live in corporate housing, as many of them do.
Yeah, or live far away from
Yeah.
here and drive in every day.
Yeah.
We should spare a minute here just to talk about Evan Gershkovich. So we all got together for a big picture yesterday to stand with Evan. It's been more than a year now. He just had an appearance in his trial, I think.
Just today.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we've actually done a podcast episode on Evan before, but, as the Wall Street Journal representative, do you want to say a few words about Evan and kind of where things are?
The last time I did this, which was yesterday, I got accused of crying. I don't know Evan personally, but he is my colleague, and I know we have a lot of colleagues who do know him very well, and he is a great colleague, obviously. So he's like 500, or he's nearing 500 days in this shitty prison.
Yeah.
Can we say?
Yes, you can.
And so anyway, and Courtney interviewed Roger Carstens, who's like essentially the administration's, actually came from the Trump administration, but survived and stayed in the Biden administration, who is partially responsible for trying to get him out.
I think it's one of his cases. He's the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, and there are certain Americans who are detained overseas on what the U.S. considers unlawfully detained,
right.
And Evan is one of his cases.
Yeah,
which is, and I think it's one of the more high profile.
And so the problem is like as Courtney experienced, as we all did in the audience yesterday, is trying to get Roger to kind of talk about where the case is or whatever. What we know internally is like the fewer things people say about this particular case or any of the other cases that Roger has, the better. And sometimes actually it does get very quiet around Evan, and then we kind of know that there might be something afoot, and then that goes away. Sometimes, what Roger said yesterday is like he pledges that Evan will come home. And
he did say he was confident that would happen. Yeah. We're going to wrap because we're going to all go back out and go have fun in Aspen. But our tradition on Chatter is that the last question is I reach into the Chatter box. I don't have a box here,
right.
So I've had to improvise.
Notional.
And ask you a pre-written question that has nothing
to do with
I'm
scared suddenly, actually.
Wow.
That's it. So I'm going to ask
don't make
you.
it about sports or something.
Oh, my God.
Something like that, right?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's no sports questions.
Okay,
But
good.
do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay. So pick a number between 1 and 10.
7.
Okay. 7 is... What is your favorite or least favorite spy or political thriller movie or film or TV show?
Oh God, I'm such a nerd. I don't watch anything that's like cool.
Really?
Okay. This show. Okay, this will give you a sense of what a nerd I am.
Okay.
Recently, I finished watching Succession.
Okay.
Which I love.
Yeah.
It's about my company.
Is that right?
100%.
More or less.
Wow.
Yeah.
I loved it. And you know what I loved about it is because everyone in it was awful. Every character was awful.
Oh, yeah, they're
and
all
like,
terrible.
I also just recently watched Big Little Lies, which I loved.
Okay.
And then also The Morning Show. So clearly, I'm like a Netflix person, I guess. And I don't. And
But no spy or political thrillers? Do you just not like the
what's
genre?
a political? I don't even know.
Did you watch House of Cards?
I actually literally finished watching House of Cards only recently.
Did you like it?
This just shows you I'm years behind on everything that's popular for other people. You know?
It's like she just watched The Sopranos.
I haven't watched.
Have you seen Leave It to Beaver?
Sopranos are still on my list that I haven't watched yet. You know what? I've never seen Game of Thrones. None of those things.
Oh wow!
I got 1,000 kids. Like
you got a lot of
my
kids.
TV is Bluey or hockey. And that's it. So
well, Game of Thrones would count as a political thriller.
would it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I
It's
guess
all
House
politics.
of Cards is probably the most recent.
And did
one
you
I've
like
watched.
it?
I loved it.
Did you like the way it ended?
No, I
Yeah.
hated how
Everyone
it
hates the
ended.
ending.
I hate the endings of everything.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I'm a nerd. I watched.
Okay.
The Morning Show. I loved.
I love the morning show.
Love the Morning Show.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, so
now
Gordon,
I'm scared.
Pick a
but-
number between 1 and 10.
I can pick
don't
7.
Don't pick 7.
I can't pick that.
Don't be a nerd.
All right, 3.
3. Oh, this is a good one. What common misperception about your profession makes your blood boil?
Good one. I mean, it's funny because I was watching a lot of the Republican convention in the off time here in my room, and, there's just the open, kind of red meat servings that a lot of Republicans do. And this is not a partisan statement about Republicans, but, I think we all learned under Trump that there's a First Amendment thing that we all try to uphold, and we try to keep, try to be accurate in our reporting and objective in our reporting, whatever. But it gets, when you hear people just casually using, and I literally don't say fake news, although I just said it, because it just, even as a joke, I just really don't hate. I mean, it actually does kind of make my butt, because I just feel like it's completely wrong, and that particular term is like way overused and it isn't accurate to begin with. So I feel like that, and there's recent examples of it because of the convention, because there was a lot of that in it.
Yeah. I would.
Kari Lake, her whole speech. I mean, she came. That was one of the ones.
And she's a journalist.
She literally came out and said, "Welcome everyone, welcome." And then
that was the one I was thinking. Actually,
yeah, I take it back. I don't welcome the lamestream media and all of it. And she's pointing. It's like I gotta tell you, that makes my blood boil because what is the value of that?
Yeah.
Here you have an opportunity on this major platform in front of all of your people, and you're not, and it's on TV, so you're people who don't agree with you, and that's the message you choose.
Yeah,
that's what you choose. I mean, what is the value of that?
There's no future.
Please.
And that's red meat for her, and she's not doing well, and she knows that she can get and you see the faces, and they're like, oh yeah, you tell it.
And it was scary at the Butler rally where Trump was shot. That after people were filing out, they were turning to the media and saying things like, "This is your fault. You raised the temperature. You did this."
So crazy. Right.
I think that's going to be, it's, to me, I will say I am concerned in a future administration about physical attacks coming on the media. We didn't see it so much, thankfully, in the first term as I thought we might, but it's the temperature has gone way, way up against the press.
And I got to tell you, it's like this may surprise people, but I actually firmly believe that Donald Trump's first presidency made me, I won't speak for everyone, I feel like it made me a better reporter.
Yeah.
Because I had to work so much harder to get stories, and because you knew that there was a very real chance the President of the United States was going to tweet that you were fake news, it's not that we didn't button up everything before, but I buttoned up I scrutinized word after word after word.
Yeah.
And it made me a better reporter. And it's so frustrating, and it's daunting to think about another President Trump. It's daunting as a reporter because you know that it's going, the relationship is, or the stories are, there's going to be so many stories, so many potential stories. You're going to have to work really hard to get them. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we don't work hard on the Biden administration. We most certainly do. It's not easy to get stories, but you're going to have to work so hard, and then it's going to come against this backdrop of everyday Americans are going to just hate you.
Yeah.
By virtue of the fact that it's the job that you do, that you work so hard, and that you take pride in.
Yeah, and take very seriously.
Yeah, and take very seriously. And so I for one hope that some people like Kari Lake will take a step back and say, you're not helping this democracy. Right. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
But I hate the misunderstanding that people think that, we secretly just don't want a Trump administration because, we're, these dyed-in-the-wool liberals or whatever, whether we are, whether we're not. I've covered the military for a long time. I actually identify pretty well with military members who, take an oath. We don't take an oath, but we, in fact do, but are apolitical, and because if somebody tells them to take the Hill, they got to take the Hill, and a lot of them don't vote. And for many years, I didn't vote. I do vote, but I didn't vote in part because I wanted to just feel as clean, right? Yeah. I think voting is important, obviously, so I do vote, but but I hate that misunderstanding that the liberal, fake news media is all out and in the tank for Biden in this case, or for the Democratic Party. It's just not true.
Yeah,
it's not true. I mean, I just don't think it's not at this level for professional journalists who do this for a living and take it very seriously.
Yeah,
our job is to question all elected officials and question, and I really, and there are some of us who take that very seriously. And I think people like Gordon and I who cover military and recognize that the information, there's a level of responsibility that we take on in covering the military, because we recognize that the information that we put out there, it has wide-ranging implications. And I genuinely hope there can be some sort of a reckoning here, and that if in fact President Trump is reelected, or frankly even if President Biden is whomever it is, that there can be somehow people can realize that there are reporters out there who spend weeks away from their families and work hard and go into dangerous places, and we certainly don't do it for the glory or the money, but we do it because we care. And I don't know. I hope that the temperature changes on that, but
I did too.
We'll see.
I did too.
Who knew that number 3 was going to be so triggering?
I love it. This is so good.
What's your favorite spy novel, Gordon?
And there are other questions on here like who was the best James Bond? But I mean, you know.
Oh my God, that's an easy one, right?
Is it?
No, it's not actually, and I'm a loser, so I don't even know.
I would date myself if I said who my favorite one was because he was
Sean Connery.
No, but Roger Moore.
Oh,
but my uncle
okay.
shared that same name.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, interesting.
So
Roger
that's
Moore
why I was kind of like.
was your uncle. Okay.
He was not, James Bond person, but he was a doctor.
That's too bad.
Saving lives, just in a different way.
No, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, Courtney Kube, Gordon Lubold, you guys are two of the best reporters out there. I love you both. You're great friends. Thank you for joining me on Chatter.
Thanks for
Thank you
was
for
fun.
having me. I feel really like glamorous being on your podcast.
Oh,
I do.
I'm so glad. I feel just honored to have you here. Let's go get some like chocolate brownies and some like
flourless
protein chicken, like cage-free chicken stuff. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
That was Chatter, a production of Lawfare and Goat Rodeo. Please subscribe to the podcast and find us on Twitter @ThatWasChatter.